What's up, guys? Wade here with the second lecture and lesson, which this is one you can probably skip if you're looking straight to there. This is not really, I guess, much of a lecture, but I wanted it to go in second. So what we're going to be looking at today, guys, is building a home lab or a simulator. Um, and this is not going to be early, but I figured I needed to go ahead and put this in there. If you want to follow along, you want to be able to do the hands-on. This video is for that. As I said, it will be a little while before I hit stuff. I'm going to give time for people to build these if you're following along through the videos. If the videos are already made, which is through the future, with all the videos done or most of them, this video is kind of aimed to you. Maybe you don't know how to build your home lab, or maybe you don't know how to, or what you need to do, go about to work on a method for hands-on. So, I'm here for you guys for that, and we're going to talk about it, as a lot of this kind of gets left out in some videos, where you'll see them use something, but you'll kind of be a little bit in the dark. So, with that being said, we will be taking a look at two options, guys. We have two options. You've got what they call a home lab, which is what I've got, and I have a really nice one, which we will be walking through some of it from there. I would let people actually remote in and use it, but the bandwidth and stuff that we get to would be nightmare, and then the threat of just security-wise, which there ain't really much that they would get from here. So maybe in the future I can get a separate internet line and actually, or donations come in or enough views, and hook a separate line here, as I get great internet service here, and can get people in to use the lab for set times or something, with some kind of option from there. And we'll just have the fee kind of charge a little bit more towards the internet. I'd have to have a fee for what, like, be able to cover the internet and probably the usage of it, somewhat for like wear, not really wear and tear, but somewhat at that, to keep it up. If one messes up, basically I can get it replaced. My lab consists of, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 routers currently, 4 Cisco Fongs, and then let's see, switches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 Cisco switches with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10 HP switches, which HP would not. They're kind of the same as Cisco, but they're not used. But I do have HP switches, which is segregated on my rack, which is actually right here beside me. It's like not even a foot from where my hand is from here. And I do use it a lot, guys. It's been a great investment. It helped me a ton as far as being able to do my own thing. So without further ado, let's take a look. Your other option would be the basically GNS3. And GNS3 is right here, and you have to have VMware set up, in my opinion, to make it run really well, and so on from there. But GNS3 is a lot more complicated to probably get going. But let's pull up, we're just going to open a project. It's going to start up my VMware too. IP and IP version 6 set up. So there's a new version available. Now it is free. GNS3 is free. Getting the images can be a pain in the butt for the switches and routers, but I'll show you what GNS3 looks like. That way you get it. Well, VM's got to run still. There it goes. Okay. Let's see if I can open that back up. So IP version 6 should come up. My VMware is up now as it's using it. So you can see from here, and I can start these up, and these are OS images, basically of routers. And it's about as close to the real thing as you can about get. The only thing is I found that there is bugs in GNS3. Maybe something troubleshooting wise would be actually working, and it won't. I know one of them was a routing protocol, and I think I was using EIGRP, and I was doing troubleshooting or whatever. I knocked a link down, and instead of it taking the longer path like it was supposed to, because I shut down the interface, it thought the interface was still technically up, but it was showing it down, and I couldn't ping it from another router. But one of the routers randomly was still, the one I actually shut the interface down was still going the shorter path, and there was no reason that it should. And so you'll run into stuff like that. So GNS3, you do got to kind of know when you get to that point. You're like, all right, man, GNS3 is probably bugged on this part, as you will run into that. But it's the same as a router interface here, as you can see. A little bit aggravating to set up, so take that extra time, like I said, throughout this time, to actually set it up and learn how GNS3, because you're probably going to do a lot of reading on it. Or it might be super easy, but I do recommend getting VMware, some type of VMware for it. So the other option, you know about GNS3, which is all basically like running off of your PC. Incredible software, though. It is super incredible software. It's the cheapest option, but it does have its flaws at the same time, guys. So I want you to understand that. It's a green cup, by the way. That's why it does that. But so the best option to me, like the number one option, if you cannot do the number one, GNS3 is pretty much going to be your solution. But if you really wanted the real deal, I recommend getting a lab. Some of them call it a lab kit. It's on from there. For the CCNA, you don't need nothing too fancy. You'll see all these like phones. You don't need all this. Like maybe if you're going for voice, maybe, but you really don't need all that. Here, this one's a nice one. I like this setup here. It's only $2.99. I recommend about 3 routers and maybe 2 switches. But to get the full effect of everything, like this here to me is efficient enough. It ain't going to hinder you at all. The only thing you can't really run off of here, and I mean, if you did 3 switches and you went 2 routers, you would also, but I highly recommend 3 routers and 2 switches at a minimum. You can get away with 2 routers and 2 switches, but you're going to have to memorize some stuff or really pay attention in the videos how they show in my video from there. But so the bare minimum, like if you want to, you can't really afford it, you can do 2 routers and 2 switches. But I recommend, to be able to like feel comfortable, 3 routers, 3 switches. I meant 3 routers, 2 switches, but if you want to maximize and nothing be unordinary and you'll get to see everything in the CCNA entirety, 3 routers and 3 switches. And the reason for 3 switches, you'll want to see spanning tree protocol, STP. Spanning tree protocol actually works, and it takes usually 3 switches to really see how it works, I guess you can say. You might can loop 2 and it would still, well, I don't think so, but I was trying to think if there's a way to loop 2, and if I figure that out, I'll come back and, well, I'll put a message on this. But spanning tree would take 3 switches usually, and routing protocols, to see learned routing protocols, takes 3 routers. Now, can you set a routing protocol without 3 routers? You can, but to actually see it learn the route and how it learns the route, 3 is really nice. To see that, because you will know then that you have the routing protocol actually set up correctly with that. The only thing I would say you might not get to see is load balancing, but that's no big deal. But you really don't even have to see that, because I really don't think that's going to be really much into there at all. Maybe CCNP you're going to see more of that. The CCNA, I don't think they really hammer on it much at all. But the 3 routers, you would actually get to see how OSPF works, RIP, EIGRP, all of those. You really get to see how they work, how to use the DHCP helper, and etc. there, commands that Normally with 2, you're not going to really see the full effect. You would see it, so there's so much more in routers, as you can hear me explaining, versus the 3 switches, which the 3 switches, the only thing you're going to get with that third switch will be able to see how spanning tree protocol actually works from there, because everything else, the trunk ports for VLANs, all that, it can all be done with just 2 switches. So your third switch is only going to give you one thing that you're basically, if you had 2 instead of 3, there's only one thing you got to really pay attention to in my videos, and that's how spanning tree protocol works. And they don't really talk a ton about spanning tree protocol in the CCENT. So, I mean, you basically could watch it in a video, spend about 5 minutes on it, and maybe jot notes, and you should be good with the 2 switches and 3 routers. If you go through 2 switches and 2 routers, you want to watch how the dynamic routing protocols work. And, you know, static routes you'll be able to do with 2, and make sure that you're, basically set it, default routes and so on, but you won't be able to see how a route's properly learned, or if it's been configured correctly to the full extent, I guess you can say, without 3 routers, because 2 of them you probably could figure out somewhat if they were configured correctly. But you'd have to really pay attention to my videos, make sure everything of yours kind of matches on the 2, and get a general idea. So with the lab, basically a minimum is 2. The standard, I'd say, or what I recommend if you're trying to go to cheapest on the lab, is 3 routers, 2 switches. And what you want is, if you don't buy them from here with the rack and everything, you want 2 2950s. You can get 2960s if you want, but the cheapest ones basically is 2950, and you want, I would say right now, for the OSI on these switches, you want nothing below 12 for it. The routers, depending on the routers you got, most of them you're going to want to iOS 15, and you want 1841s at least. If you got a 2811 or so on in there in the mix, that's no big deal. More power to you, but I wouldn't go no lower than the 1841s, and the 1841s just serve a nice purpose for the many options that you can learn and the abilities that they have. But basically, you need to make sure that they do have the 15 iOS, because if they run to 12, the ones I've ran into do not have the IP version 6 commands in them, and you will run into something like that. So if you get one with a older iOS, make sure you pay attention to the IP version 6 commands, and which there isn't a lot of IP version 6 on the exam. There is some, so you want to know it a little bit, but there ain't a ton. Most of it is IP version 4 related stuff in everything that I've seen. So most of it is IP version 4, but IP version 6, it's coming, so it doesn't hurt to learn it. But so if you ain't got the latest iOS on them routers, let's say if you're buying them from eBay, then really pay attention to IP version 6, and you're going to run into that. You're going to be like, man, why don't I got IP version 6? It's because you got an older iOS with 1841s, and they won't unless they get updated. They won't have those. So nothing below the 12 version of iOS, like 12.4. And nothing for the routers if you want to have every command that you can see in the CCENT and CCNA. Nothing below 15. And that's from my experience. Just taking that exam, I will tell you that you do want the 15 iOS on there. If you ain't got it, at least really pay attention in the IP version 6 videos. Just really pay attention, because them are commands you're not going to have. There's not a lot to it, and you can get away without it. So if you want to go a little bit cheaper, you find a deal. Just really pay attention to those. Write down some of the commands, like you'll have an IPv6 unicast routing that you got to enable, and so on from there. And then from there, most of it you got to understand maybe how link local works versus unicast global, and etc. from there. So there'll be a few things, but like I said, it's stuff you can write down in about 10 minutes and look over, and you should be fine. But if you get to 15, you can actually do everything that you see me do, and you'll have the latest iOS. And anything that you run into in the exam is going to be the exact same command line, or nearly as close as possible. Like the commands you would be using will be on your router just as much as theirs. Um, on the exam, actually, the switch I ran into, I did look at the version and it caught me off guard, was a 12.4. And I can't remember what interface it was pretending to be switch wise. So, but the routers were 15. So every time I did a show run, I did remember catching that the routers were running the 15 iOS on the exam, and the switches were, or the switch that I had was a 12.4 version or something to that extent, 12 something. I don't memorize it as well. So, all right, so we looked at both of these options. So you got the GNS3 and then you got these home labs. Can you go crazy with the home labs? Of course you can. But if you want a bare minimum like this one here, this is a nice setup here. These are two layer 3 switches and then one layer 2 switch. But to be honest, for the CCNA, it won't be, you won't really need it. It will be something that you're not going to really need at this point. A layer 3 switch, you layer 2, and you're pretty much set with routers from there. But this one is nice. You'll probably see it more in CCNP from there. But usually the layer 3 type stuff that they want in the routing, we're gonna talk about a router on a stick, kind of for to serve that purpose for people that don't got layer 3s or you need VLAN traffic to that extent, because usually a lot of it is for VLAN traffic related stuff. I mean, not only that, I say that, but you know, there's more than that. But as far as this exam, that the only thing you have to know about layer 3 is, hey, layer 3's IP, and so on from there. And IP routing has to be enabled on a layer 3 switch from there. So, with that being said, we come to the conclusion. So you have two types here, guys. You got the GNS3, which is software. It is free. It can be a pain in the butt to find iOS. It can be a pain in the butt finally to get set up. It's going to be a little bit of a nightmare maybe for some if you're not very familiar with how it works. Or from there, I mean, it's because you're going to have to run, you know, get something in for a VMware and then run like a VMware server basically to use in the GNS3 if you want to be able to use it to its full ability. And then you got to get iOS images, and you might not be able to get them that easily. I'm not sure what's legal and what's illegal as far as when it comes to the images, but I think there might be a free pack out there of something. I don't know. But I took images. I can take images off my router, and I can load them in there. And that's pretty much what I've done from there. But if you want the easiest thing that you buy it and it's ready, the lab is the way to go. And plus, like I said, GNS3 can have glitches. I've ran into a few myself. I've seen people run into glitches where my lab environment, I've never ran into anything. From there, it's about as real as it gets. Actually, it runs much quicker, a little bit nicer. Some commands in GNS3 is default, because it's GNS3 but originally in Cisco it is not default. So if you get a question like that, you can get confused if you're used to running labs in GNS3, because it might be a default. For example, what is it? Logging synchronous is automatically on in GNS3, but in a router and switch in Cisco, by default it is off. And I don't expect a question like that, but I mean, if you're worried about something like that, I recommend getting the home lab if you got the money for it. If you got the money for it and you really want to get into networking, get a home lab, because you can always advertise that whenever you're trying to get hired by somebody, that you have your home lab. You know, you work basically at home. It's a hobby, and they might ask you, well, what kind of routers and switches do you use? And you tell them, and they get a general idea of what all you know. From there, it's going to sound good. Where you're doing GNS3, well, anybody can say kind of like GNS3, and then, you know, varies from there, you know, to that point. But if you got a home lab, then they know you're dedicated to learning and actually seeing it live environment of it from there. But that's my idea of it, guys, for this lecture is basically building a home lab or simulator, whichever you decide to do. It's your choice. If you got the money, I say do the home lab. If you don't, then you might be stuck with GNS3, which is fine. Like I said, it's great software. It used to not be nothing like that out there, and you were forced to do a home lab. Um, but even the engineers love to do GNS3 because it's just so easy. Basically, you don't have to have these routers and stuff sitting in on your desk and stuff to test stuff from there, and you can just double click and save anything that you wanted to into GNS3 and test, and it's just right there in a topology, so you can get a right idea and keep up pretty with the whole layout of it a little bit easier from there. But the home lab is more realistic, and like I said, you're not going to have them glitches, so nothing really beats the actual device. And if you're planning on moving up past that, the home labs become more and more what do you call it, realistic as far as cabling and so on from there versus the GNS3 um, from there, because you're basically, if you use GNS3, you might not remember what cables you're using. If this is a good example to connect two routers, all you would know is you're using a Ethernet connection, right? You wouldn't know if you're using a rollover or none of that. In GNS3, you really wouldn't know. But if you were at a home lab and you were doing it, you would know which cable you're using. So a question like that, you would be able to answer instantly. And you're going to know it by hands-on, not even really have to study it, where somebody who doesn't have it and they're doing it through GNS3, they're going to have to memorize that answer, or they're going to have to hear it and write it down. So that's kind of like one advantage. Same with the crossover, rollover, crossover. And I mean, I said rollover, but rollovers get into the console. Crossover to connect two routers, two switches, but we'll talk about that. But usually the answer to looking for is to connect two switches, two routers, or something to that extent. It uses a crossover cable, even two PCs, crossover cable. About everything else is straight through. Rollover cable for console connections for there. So, guys, that does it for this lecture 2 lesson. Like I said, this is nothing to really do with the certification. This is to prep you that you will need to do for the hands-on. I mean, you could decide to skip this and do the video, but this is basically telling you giving you a heads up what you need to set up so you can follow me in some of these videos and these labs so you can practice hands-on. It will help a ton if you practice hands-on. It helps you memorize some of the things that will be a little bit tougher to memorize in your head or by memory. As whenever we get to labs, I will be slowly doing things, asking questions, and talking about the setup of each one from there. We'll be using my physical home lab on some of it. Some of it we're using GNS3, and the only reason we're using GNS3 is to show the topology on to the viewers, so you guys get a general idea how it's set up. I might do a mixture of both. I might just lay out the topology on GNS3, but actually doing it for my home routers from there as I prefer. Usually I love to do everything through my home lab over GNS3, even though I use both for hundreds of hours. But that does it for this video, guys. I hope you guys found it useful. If you enjoyed it and you want to continue to learn more and prep for your CCENT, or if you're going through these videos and you're looking to get certified, please follow, subscribe. More videos will keep coming out. If you have any questions, feel free to PM me. I would be more than happy to answer your questions. Of course, questions that I cannot answer, which I've talked about in my previous videos, is I can't tell you what I scored on CCNT due to agreement, and I cannot tell you the exact questions that was on the CCENT in the certification that I took this morning. But we'll continue to do videos. I'm going to try to release videos here and there during the times. Maybe I'll do one or two and then release them in increments. Like this video might not come out on April the 2nd. It might come out the 4th or 5th, or it might come out the next day, as I am doing this at night. But anyways, guys, if you enjoy it, please subscribe. Any questions, feel free to PM me with anything that you have. Just let me know. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this video has been beneficial to you. and I hope you're intending on following the rest of the videos with your home lab or a simulator setup. Until next time, guys, see ya.